Mum, hurry up. I can't handle this anymore. Those words hit me like a thunderclap. Ethan's voice trembled through the phone, raw and desperate. I froze in the middle of the grocery aisle, my hands gripping a carton of milk like it was the only thing keeping me upright. Ethan? I whispered, heart pounding. What's wrong? Where are you? No answer, just shaky breathing. Then a quiet, please, just come home. The line went dead. I left everything in the car and ran out, my car keys slipping from my trembling hands. The entire drive home I replayed his voice again and again. The pain, the fear, the way he said Mom. He hadn't called me that in months. Not since our last fight. The house was quiet when I burst through the front door. Too quiet. I called out his name, searching each room, until I found him sitting on the floor of the living room, surrounded by open boxes and framed photos. His dad's old photos. What's going on? I asked, breathless. He looked up, eyes red. I can't do this anymore, Mum. Pretending everything's fine. Pretending I'm fine. I walked closer. Ethan, talk to me. He shook his head. I tried. But you're always busy, always acting like you're okay. I thought maybe if I did the same, it would help. But it doesn't. My throat tightened. He wasn't angry. He was breaking. I knelt beside him. You don't have to pretend for me. Not ever. He stared at a photo of his dad, my late husband, Daniel. It's been 3 years, he said quietly. And I still hear him. Every day. His voice, his laugh. Sometimes I even dream he's still here, calling my name. My chest ached. I do too. He looked at me then, really looked, and for a moment, I saw the boy who once sat on Daniel's shoulders at the lake. Grinning at the world. I miss him so much, he whispered. I know, I said softly. So do I. He rubbed his face with his hands. I found something, he said suddenly. That's why I called you. He pointed to a stack of boxes by the couch. One was open, filled with old letters tied with a blue ribbon. What are these? I asked. Dad's, he said. At least. I think so. But they're not all to you. I froze. What do you mean? He picked up a letter, eyes flickering with confusion. They're addressed to someone named Clara. The name meant nothing to me. But the handwriting, it was Daniel's. My stomach twisted. Let me see that. Ethan handed me the letter. The paper was yellowed, edges soft from years of folding. I untied the ribbon and unfolded the top one carefully. The first line stole my breath. Clara, I don't know how much longer I can keep this a secret from her. The words blurred. My hands trembled. Who's Clara? Ethan asked. I tried to answer, but my voice caught. I don't know. He frowned. Mum, did Dad? Don't, I whispered. Not yet. We sat there in silence. The clock ticked loudly, filling the heavy air. Outside, the wind pushed against the windows like the world itself wanted to hear what we'd just read. I wanted to believe there was a reasonable explanation, a misunderstanding, a coincidence. Daniel wasn't perfect, but he loved me. I was sure of it. Weren't we happy? Weren't we real? Ethan pulled another letter from the box. There's more. No, Ethan. But he'd already opened it. His voice shook as he read. She deserves the truth. But how do I tell her I was never meant to be hers? My vision blurred. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Mum, Ethan said softly. What if Dad? I stood abruptly, my heart racing. Stop, please. He looked at me, eyes full of questions I wasn't ready to face. I need a minute, I said, turning away. But as I did, Something slipped from the stack of letters and fell to the floor. A small photograph, creased and faded. I bent down and picked it up. It wasn't me in the picture. It was a woman with kind eyes and dark hair, smiling next to Daniel. On the back, in his handwriting, it said, "For Clara, my heart's quiet home." The words hit like a blade. My breath caught, my knees almost gave out. Behind me, Ethan whispered, "Mom." Who was she? I couldn't answer. I just stared at the photo, at the man I thought I knew, and felt my world tilt into something I no longer recognized. Because in that single moment, I realized this wasn't just about missing him. It was about never really knowing who he was. And maybe that was the secret he took to his grave. The next morning, the house was filled with silence again. That kind that makes every sound echo too loud. The letters sat on the table between us, unopened now, but heavy with questions. Ethan hadn't said much since last night. He just kept staring at the photo, tracing the woman's smile with his thumb. "Mom," he said quietly, "you really didn't know her?" I shook my head. "No, I've never seen her before." He looked down. "Then maybe she was before you." Before me. The words stung, but they made sense. I'd met Daniel 15 years ago, on a rainy afternoon that had started as a mistake and ended as a beginning. I still remember it like a movie scene. A blur of headlights, a splash of water, and a man holding out his umbrella with that crooked grin. "Looks like the storm picked favorites," he'd said, offering me shelter as I stood, drenched, outside the bookstore. I'd laughed, embarrassed. Or maybe it's just testing our patience. From that moment, something in me shifted. He had this calm energy, the kind that made the noise of life quiet down. We talked for an hour under that awning, about books, about coffee, about everything and nothing. When he finally asked for my number, I hesitated. "You don't even know my name." He smiled. "Then tell me." "I'd rather start this story properly." That was Daniel. Careful, kind, but full of mystery. We built a life slowly, with small promises and steady laughter. Ethan was just a boy then, shy and uncertain about me at first. But Daniel made it easy. "She's part of our team now," he told him one night at dinner. "And teams don't work unless everyone plays." For years, it felt like home. Until one winter evening, a few months before Daniel's accident, when things quietly began to shift. He became distant, distracted. He'd sit on the porch after dinner, staring at nothing, lost somewhere I couldn't reach. "Everything okay?" I'd asked one night. He'd smiled faintly. "Just work, deadlines." But his eyes said something else. Something tired. I wanted to believe him. So, I did. Now, looking at those letters, I wasn't so sure. I reached for another envelope from the pile. The paper was soft, the ink faded, but Daniel's handwriting was still so familiar. "Clara, I keep replaying that day by the river. You said we'd always find our way back, even if life took us down different roads." I stopped reading. The words didn't sound like a secret affair. They sounded like memory, something old, unfinished. "Ethan," I said slowly, "your dad once told me he lived in a small town before moving here. Somewhere near Lakewell, I think." He frowned. "That's 3 hours away. Maybe she was someone from there. Someone he knew before us." He hesitated. "Do you want to find out?" I looked at him, at the mix of confusion and curiosity in his eyes, and realized this wasn't just about Daniel anymore. It was about the pieces of our lives we didn't know existed. "Yes," I said. "We need to." As we sorted through the letters, I found one dated just a month before Daniel and I met. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Clara, I'm leaving tomorrow. You told me to follow what feels right. Maybe one day we'll understand why timing never worked for us." Timing. That word hit me harder than I expected. Because I'd always believed Daniel and I met by chance. Two strangers caught in the rain. But what if that moment had been something else? What if he had just walked away from someone he couldn't forget? That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that woman's smile. The softness in her eyes. The way Daniel had written my heart's quiet home. Who was she to him? And why did he keep her letters all those years? Around midnight, I found myself in Daniel's old study. The one room I'd barely entered since he died. Dust covered the shelves, but everything else looked untouched, frozen in time. I turned on the lamp and opened the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside were old receipts, photos, and one worn leather notebook. His handwriting filled every page. Sketches, plans, thoughts. But near the end, a single line caught my eye. Clara's house by the lake. Someday I'll tell them. Tell them. I felt the air leave my lungs. Them. That meant us. Maybe he hadn't been hiding her. Maybe he'd been planning to tell us something important. Something unfinished. I closed the notebook and sat back, tears welling up. For the first time, I didn't feel betrayed. I felt curious, and oddly close to him again. When I told Ethan the next morning, he stared at the notebook like it was a map. "Mum," he said carefully, "if there's a house by the lake, maybe we should go." I hesitated. "You think it's still there?" He nodded. "There's only one way to know." I looked out the window, at the sun breaking through the trees. For years, I'd been afraid to revisit the past. But maybe this was what Daniel wanted, for us to finish the story he never got to tell. "Okay," I said finally. "We'll go." Ethan smiled faintly. "Road trip?" I tried to laugh, but my heart was racing. Because deep down, I already knew that lake, that house. It wasn't just a place. It was the truth waiting for us. And as we packed the letters and notebook into a small box, I saw something tucked inside the last envelope we hadn't opened. A folded piece of paper, different from the rest. On it was a single line, written in Daniel's handwriting. "If you're reading this, it means I never got the chance to explain." I stared at it, my heart pounding. He knew we'd find them, and whatever waited by that lake was meant for us to see. The road curved around the lake, glittering beneath the late afternoon sun. After 3 hours of silence and nervous glances, Ethan finally spoke. "Are you sure this is the place?" I nodded, gripping the steering wheel tighter. That's what the note said. The house by the lake. It appeared suddenly through the trees. Small, wooden, with a porch that leaned slightly forward as if time had bowed it. The air felt heavier here, full of things left unsaid. Ethan got out first. "It's still standing." I stepped beside him, heart pounding. The front door creaked open as if it had been waiting. Inside, the smell of old wood and rain hit me familiar, though I'd never been here before. Ethan ran his fingers over a dusty picture frame. "Mom, look." It was a photo. Daniel, younger, smiling beside the same woman from the letter. Clara. Before I could speak, a voice came from behind us. "You're not supposed to be here." We turned sharply. A woman stood at the doorway, holding a grocery bag, her eyes wide in shock. Time had touched her gently, grey streaks in her dark hair, a quiet strength in her stance. I froze. I didn't need to ask who she was. I already knew. "Clara?" I said quietly. She blinked. "You. You're Margaret." My name in her mouth sounded strange, like she'd said it before. Ethan looked between us. "You know each other?" She hesitated, then set the bag down. "Not really. But I knew of you." The silence between us was thick, almost alive. I took a breath. "We found Daniel's letters." Her eyes softened. Then you know. I know he loved you, I said. But I don't understand. Why didn't he ever tell me? She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hurts more than tears. Because he didn't want to hurt you. Or me. Ethan frowned. So what were you to him? Clara looked at him carefully. I was his first love. Before your mom. Before everything. She motioned toward the lake. He came here often. Even after he married you. Not to see me. I moved away years ago. But to think. This was where he felt at peace. Her words stung, but they didn't feel like betrayal. They felt like truth. One I hadn't been brave enough to face until now. Did he ever tell you about me? I asked. Clara nodded slowly. Once, years after you married. He wrote me a letter saying he'd finally found what he'd been searching for. Someone who made him want to stay still. That was you. I swallowed hard, tears pricking my eyes. Then why keep the letters? She smiled sadly. Because some parts of the past aren't meant to be erased. Only understood. The room fell quiet again. Ethan stood near the window, looking out at the lake, his shoulders tense. All this time, I thought Dad kept secrets because he didn't trust us, he said. That maybe he just didn't know how to say goodbye. Clara looked at him, eyes kind. Your father loved deeply. Sometimes too deeply to explain it right. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the sound of waves against the dock. I walked toward the porch, needing air. Clara followed, standing a few steps behind. I used to wait for him here, she said softly. But he stopped coming after he met you. I think he was trying to close that chapter, but he didn't know how. I turned to face her. And you never tried to find him? She shook her head. Some loves you honor by letting go. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The light on the lake shimmered gold, and I could almost see Daniel, laughing. Alive, holding both of our hearts in different lifetimes. Ethan stepped outside, his voice low. So what now? We just leave. I looked at him, then at Clara. No. I think we stay a little. He wanted us to come here. Maybe to meet. Maybe to understand. Clara nodded. There's something else. She disappeared into the house and returned with a small wooden box. She handed it to me. Daniel left this with me the week before he passed, she said softly. He asked me to keep it safe until someone came for it. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a folded note and a silver locket. The note was written in his familiar scrawl. For Margaret and Ethan, and for the part of me that never stopped believing in second chances. When the time is right, open the locket. I turned it over in my palm. It was engraved with 3 initials, D, M, and C. Clara's hand covered her mouth. He made this after we all met that one time at the memorial for his old friend. Remember? I did. I'd met her then, briefly, without realizing who she was. She'd smiled at me kindly. I thought she was just someone from his past work. Ethan whispered. He wanted us to find her. I nodded slowly. And maybe to forgive him. Clara smiled through her tears. He always believed love didn't end. It just changed form. The sun dipped lower, painting the lake in amber light. Ethan placed the box gently back on the table. So, Mom, he said softly, do we open it? I looked between him and Clara. 2 people forever tied to the same man, 2 sides of one story. Yes, I said finally, my voice trembling. But not here. Not yet. Clara tilted her head. When? When it feels right, I said. When it doesn't hurt anymore. The 3 of us stood in quiet understanding as the wind rippled across the lake. For the first time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full of endings, of beginnings, of everything Daniel had tried to leave behind for us to heal. But deep inside that locket, I knew there was one last truth waiting. one that could change how we remembered him forever. And tomorrow, we would open it. The next morning, the lake was covered in mist. The air was still, the kind that feels like it's holding its breath. Ethan sat on the porch steps, turning the locket in his hand. Clara stood by the window, watching the fog drift. I made coffee. Though none of us really wanted it. It was time. "Are you ready?" Ethan asked quietly. No one truly was. But we all nodded. He handed me the locket. I could feel Daniel in it. The weight, the warmth, the history. I clicked it open. Inside was a tiny folded paper. Old and fragile. Clara reached out. Her voice barely a whisper. "Read it." I unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was Daniel's, neat but trembling. "If you're holding this, it means I didn't get to explain. I loved two people in two different worlds, one from my past, and one who saved my future." My breath caught. I read on. "Clara was my first home. But Margaret, you were my peace. I never stopped caring for her, but I learned what love truly meant because of you." Silence filled the room. Ethan looked between us, confusion in his eyes. I continued reading. "There's something you both deserve to know. Clara and I had a child. A son. I never knew him. He was adopted before I could find him. I searched for years, but when I met you, Margaret, I stopped looking. I told myself the past was gone." My hands shook. Son?" I whispered. Clara turned pale. "No, that can't be." Ethan stared at her. "Wait, Dad had another child." The words hung in the air, heavy and irreversible. I read the final line. "If he ever finds his way to you, treat him with the kindness I couldn't. He'll need it." The paper slipped from my hand. It fluttered to the floor like an autumn leaf. Clara sat down, her voice breaking softly. "I was young. My parents made the decision for me. I never told him until years later. He came here once. We cried for hours. Then he promised he'd keep it secret." I looked at her, my heart aching but not angry. "You both carried this alone." She nodded, tears streaking her face. "He said he'd find our son one day. But then life moved on. We moved on." Ethan was quiet, staring out at the water. "So that's why he came here," he said finally. "Not for her. Not for guilt. For a promise." I took a slow breath. He was trying to make peace before he died. Clara looked at Ethan gently. "You remind me of him. The way you think before you speak. The way you care too much, even when it hurts." He gave a faint smile, then turned to me. "Mom, you're okay." I nodded, though my voice trembled. "It doesn't change what we had. It just changes what we understand." The three of us sat together in that small, creaking house, not as strangers, not as rivals, but as people bound by the same man's complicated heart. Clara stood after a moment. "There's one more thing." She went to the corner of the room and opened an old drawer. Inside was a yellow envelope. She handed it to me. "I found this years ago after he died," she said. "It was addressed to you, but I didn't know how to send it." I opened it slowly. Inside was another note, written in Daniel's hand. "Maggie, if you ever doubt what we had, remember this. Love doesn't have to be perfect to be real. You were my peace, my forgiveness, my home. If I could live twice, I'd choose you both again. One for who I was, one for who I became." Tears blurred the words. I folded the letter back carefully and looked up. Clara was crying too, quietly, like she'd been waiting years to let it go. "I always thought I lost him," she said softly. "But maybe he never really left either of us." Ethan looked at the letters spread across the table. "So, what do we do with all this?" I didn't answer. I looked at the locket, the lake, the house that carried too many ghosts and too much love. Finally, I said, we let him rest. And we try to forgive him, not for what he hid, but for how hard he tried to make it right. Clara nodded. And the son? Ethan turned sharply. We could try to find him. I hesitated. The thought of another piece of Daniel out there, living, breathing, unaware of this story, made my heart race. Maybe that's what he wanted, Ethan said. For us to finish what he couldn't. The air shifted. The sun pushed through the clouds, spilling gold across the water dot I picked up the locket one last time. Then we start there, I said quietly. Clara looked at me surprised. You mean it? Yes, I whispered. We find him. And for the first time I saw something like hope in her eyes. Ethan smiled faintly. Dad would have liked that. I looked at the lake, calm now, reflecting the three of us standing side by side. Strangers yesterday, a family today. But even as I smiled, something tugged at me. A quiet thought I couldn't shake. If Daniel's son was still alive. What if he'd already been closer than any of us realized? We didn't sleep that night. The truth had broken us open, that somehow, in that breaking, something gentle had started to heal. The morning came quietly. Mist rolled off the lake like smoke from a candle just blown out. Ethan brewed coffee and handed me a cup. His eyes tired but calm. Clara stood by the porch rail, watching the water, her hands trembling around her own mug. We were all thinking the same thing. Daniel's son. Somewhere, out there was a life built from the same history we'd been trying to understand. Ethan finally spoke. We should look for him. His tone wasn't rushed, just certain. Clara nodded slowly. I think I know where to start. She went back inside and returned with an old notebook. Its cover cracked, pages yellow. This was Daniel's. He used to write down names, phone numbers, bits of places he visited. Maybe there's something here. Ethan and I leaned over the table as she flicked through the pages. There were addresses from years ago. Places he'd worked, friends he'd written to, small towns he'd passed through. Then, near the back, Clara stopped. Written in faded ink was a single name. Ethan Clark. Ethan froze. That's my name. Clara's eyes widened. No, it can't be. I looked at him. My son, the boy I raised, the man Daniel helped raise. And for the first time, I saw the resemblance I had never wanted to see. The shape of his jaw, the way he held his hands, even the quiet in his eyes when he was deep in thought. Clara whispered, Margaret, where did you first meet him? I felt my throat tighten. At the hospital. He was volunteering. He said he'd been in foster care for a while before college. Ethan's voice trembled. Wait, are you saying I reached out, touching his arm? Daniel's son. The words fell like a whisper and a thunderclap all at once. Clara covered her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. He found him. He found his son, Margaret. And he never told us. Ethan stepped back, his face pale. He knew, all this time? I shook my head, my heart breaking and healing at once. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he just felt it. Maybe that's why he was drawn to you. Why he wanted you here after he passed. Ethan sat down slowly, his breath unsteady. I thought he just wanted me to help clean up his estate. But maybe. He looked up at me, tears shining in his eyes. Maybe he was trying to give us to each other. Clara reached across the table, placing her hand over his. He did. He really did. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was full of understanding, of forgiveness, of love that had stretched across decades and mistakes. Outside, the mist was lifting. The lake shone like a mirror. Ethan went to the old cabinet and began sorting through boxes again. He must have left something more. he said softly after a few minutes. He found a small wooden box tucked behind a stack of papers. The lid was carved with Daniel's initials. Inside were 3 envelopes, one for each of us. Ethan handed them out quietly. Clara opened hers first. Her letter was short. You were my first home, Clara. You taught me what it means to love and lose. I hope you've forgiven the boy who didn't know how to stay. She smiled through tears. I forgave him long ago. I opened mine next. Maggie, you showed me peace. You gave me the life I was too afraid to imagine. If Ethan ever finds his way to you, love him like your own. Because he already is. My chest ached as I read those words. Daniel had known. Somehow he'd known. Ethan's hands shook as he unfolded his letter. He read it silently, his eyes filling fast. Then he looked at us, voice breaking. He wrote, Son, if you're reading this, it means I found you too late. But I want you to know, you were never forgotten. Every time I looked at the lake, I prayed it would lead you back to me. No one spoke. We just sat there. 3 people bound by one man's unfinished love story. Clara finally said, He gave us what he couldn't have each other. Ethan nodded. And he gave us this place. Maybe that's why he wanted us all here. We spent the rest of the day packing Daniel's old belongings. Some things we kept. Some we let go. By sunset, the house felt lighter. Like it had finally exhaled. As we locked up, Ethan looked back at the porch. We should scatter some of his ashes here, he said. We walked to the water's edge. Clara opened the small urn. Together we let the wind carry him into the lake, the same lake that had held all his secrets. The sky turned gold, then pink, then soft grey. Clara whispered. Goodbye, Daniel, I whispered. Thank you. Ethan said nothing, just looked out at the ripples until they faded. Before we left, I noticed something caught in the porch railing, a piece of old paper, weathered and curled. I pulled it free. It was a page from Daniel's notebook. Only one line was legible. Love doesn't end where it began. It just finds a new home. I folded it gently, slipped it into my pocket, and turned toward Ethan and Clara. They were smiling faintly, standing side by side, not as broken people, but as family. As we walked away, the lake behind us shimmered one last time, as if it were saying goodbye to. And for the first time since Daniel's death, I felt peace, not because the past was gone, but because it had finally come home. Love had always been here, waiting, forgiving, and finding its way back through us.